Argentina's president Javier Milei has always been remarkably popular. Despite implementing cost-cutting policies that most electorates would recoil at, Milei's approval ratings have consistently hovered above or around 50%, and Morning Consult polling reliably puts him as one of the most popular leaders in the world. However, for the past week or so, he's been embroiled in a headline-grabbing corruption scandal, only a couple of months after the Libra cryptocurrency shenanigans. So in this video, we're going to explain what's going on and how this political crisis could jeopardize his economic agenda, especially if it leads to a bad result at next month's elections in Buenos Aires. Never miss an episode and always feel in the loop by subscribing and ringing the bell. So let's get straight into it. This all kicked off on Tuesday last week, when local media published audio recordings in which Diego Spaniolo, Milei's personal lawyer and head of Argentina's disability agency, could apparently be heard accusing Milei's sister of embezzling funds from his agency. In the recordings, which we should be clear are yet to be verified, Spaniolo alleges that Milei's sister, Karina, who's also one of his closest political confidants, takes 3% of any payment made by the agency for disability medicines, which apparently allows her to rake in about $500,000 a month. Spaniolo also claims he told Milei about it, but, quote, he didn't fix anything. Spaniolo initially tried to deny it was him in the recordings, but on Wednesday Milei admitted that it was indeed Spaniolo speaking in the recordings, but insisted that, quote, everything he says is a lie, will take him to court and prove that he lied. And on Thursday, he sacked Spaniolo, quote, as a preventive measure. This didn't really help, and things escalated yet further on Friday when, at the request of a federal judge, Argentinian authorities carried out raids on 22 related properties, including the disability agency, a pharmaceutical company, and a number of private homes. This is bad news for Milei, not least because it undermines his anti-establishment credentials. After all, Milei spent the past couple of years accusing Argentina's political elite of endemic corruption. Polling also suggests this scandal has had more cut-through with the Argentinian public than the cryptocurrency scandal earlier in the year. The most recent poll we could find, for instance, which was conducted by an Argentinian pollster at the start of the week, showed that Milei's approval rating had fallen below 40% for the first time since he took office. While another poll showed that most Argentines were aware of the scandal, and more than half said they believed the allegations. But it's especially bad news for Milei because of the timing. He's got local elections in Buenos Aires due on September the 7th, which are widely seen as a bellwether for the all-important midterms due in late October, when all of Argentina heads to the polls to renew half of the lower house of Congress and a third of the Senate. The big risk here is that a poor showing at next month's local elections takes the momentum out of Milei's project, and the markets conclude that he's just a flash in the political pan. For context, much of Milei's economic project relies on him convincing investors and the markets that his reforms are actually going to stick. After all, even if they like Milei's policies, foreign investors aren't going to invest in Argentina and aid its economic recovery if they think Milei is just going to be replaced by another spendthrift Peronist in a couple of years' time, or if they think Congress is going to reverse his reforms when he does badly at the midterms. Milei would have been hoping that his success on the economic front and in Congress, where he's done a remarkably good job passing legislation despite only having a tiny minority of seats, might have given way to a virtuous cycle. Convinced that his reforms would stick, investors would pour money into Argentina, driving economic growth and Milei's own popularity, thus cementing his economic reforms further, etc. So far, investors have been sort of on the fence. Despite some pretty eye-catching policies, including a new investor visa and the so-called Riggy scheme, foreign investment into Argentina has been pretty meagre since Milei took office. But this crisis, especially if it leads to a bad result in September, could instead push him into a vicious cycle, where investors decide that Milei lacks the popular support to continue with his ambitious economic reforms, and so decide to withhold or even withdraw their cash from Argentina, stunting any prospective recovery and undermining Milei, thus making him even less able to push through his agenda, etc. In this light, the fact that both the peso and Argentina's bonds have fallen since the scandal will come as a real worry for Milei. It's also worth noting that this builds upon some pre-existing pressure. Milei has faced a number of legislative setbacks in recent weeks, with opposition lawmakers forcing Milei to accept an increase in disability aid, and the Senate passing new legislation aiming to boost spending on public universities. And there are signs that Argentina's economic recovery is stalling. For context, while Milei has made undeniably impressive progress in stabilising Argentina's economy, this required a deep contraction in 2024, and the recovery hasn't been quite as U-shaped as he originally promised. Having grown steadily for the past year or so, GDP has now contracted for the past 2 months, and the latest data suggest consumer confidence fell sharply in August. You get the idea. This scandal would be bad news for any politician, but it's particularly bad news for Milei because it risks pushing him into a vicious cycle and jeopardizing his entire project. The silver lining for Milei here is that the Argentinian opposition is both disorganized and unpopular. There isn't really a right-wing or conservative alternative to Milei. The centre-right Juntos coalition fell apart after the 2023 election, with lots of its splinter groups ultimately throwing their weight behind Milei. And Milei's LLA party battered former President Mauricio Macri's PRO party at the Buenos Aires city elections in May, prompting a number of senior figures in the PRO to defect. On the other side of the aisle, the main left-wing opposition, the Peronists, have been discredited by the economic mismanagement Argentina experienced under Milei's Peronist predecessor, Alberto Fernandez. And they're stuck in a power struggle between former President Cristina Fernández de Kirchner and Axel Kicillof, the governor of Buenos Aires, whom Milei described as a Stalinist pigeon. Kirchner has been convicted of corruption and barred from running for office, but she's still essentially campaigning and has been unwilling to hand the reins over to Kicillof, much to Milei's advantage. Now, this story about Milei's corruption scandal has been covered thoroughly across the media landscape, with 85 sources reporting on it. Taking a closer look, you can see that 8 of these sources came from the right and 12 of them came from the left. It's clear that there are some vast differences between each side of the political spectrum, with the left focusing on the corruption allegations and the right adopting a more sceptical stance. We're able to get this in-depth analysis thanks to our sponsor this week, Ground News, a website and app that collects articles from around the world, helping you burst your media bubble. For every story just like this one, you're able to see just how many sources are reporting on it, as well as where those sources fall politically. And that's important, as the same story can take a completely different meaning depending on how it's framed to us. Something that we find helps us tackle this problem even further is their fantastic blind spot feature, a newsfeed dedicated to showing us which stories are improperly covered by one side of the political spectrum or the other. Here you can expand your own viewpoint, or simply help you understand someone else's media reality. It's no secret that the current media landscape is constantly trying to capture your attention and sway you one way or the other. So having a tool that helps you understand bias and how it affects the media you consume is extremely crucial. If you're interested in staying on top of the news and want to explore more of the amazing features Ground News has to offer, we're offering 40% off the Unlimited Access Vantage Plan subscription by using the link in the description or scanning the QR code on screen. This offer is only available here, so make sure you go to ground.news/TLDR or click the link in the description to get started today.